Hello, everybody. This is JT Productions, and welcome back to another 2023 preview and prediction video. Today, we will be doing the two-time back-to-back national champion, my Georgia Bulldogs. So, let's get into it. Last season, I'm sure a lot of you remember it very well. Georgia ended the season going 15-0, winning their second national title in a row. Beating Ohio State in the semifinal, and then thrashing TCU 65-7 in a probably the most lopsided championship game ever. Now, this season did not come without its tribulations and triumphs. Early in the year, after two really good outings against Oregon and South Carolina, Georgia had a tough game against Kent State. For some reason, we just didn't get off the bus, and Georgia struggled a lot during that game, and it carried over to the next week when we traveled to Columbia, Missouri to take on the Missouri Tigers. Missouri led this game for 3.5 quarters, and Georgia had to make a big comeback, which if this was Kirby Smart's team 3-4 years ago, Georgia probably would not have made this comeback. And that shows you how much Kirby Smart coach teams have improved over the years. Against Auburn and Vanderbilt the next 2 weeks, we started to get back to our old selves, running the ball a lot more. And against Florida, it all came to a halt, excluding the third quarter where we gave up, I think, 13 points. Then we had a showdown against number 1 Tennessee, where we showed who the real number 1 was before beating down Mississippi State, having a very physical game against Kentucky to where we should have played a lot better, and the same thing can be said about Georgia Tech the week after. So all in all, very good year for Georgia, looking to maybe three-peat going on to the next year. So let's look at what Georgia will be working with. So let's get into the roster. Georgia had, from last year, lost Stetson Bennett, the quarterback that won those 2 national championships for us, as well as losing A.D. Mitchell to the transfer portal so that he could go be closer to his newborn son, as well as losing guys like Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Keely Ringo, Warren McClendon, Broderick Jones, Darnell Washington to the NFL draft. But Kirby Smart has done a very good job in recruiting since he's been here, really. We have a redshirt junior quarterback in Carson Beck, who, if you watched the spring game, you know he looked very good. He looked a lot better than Brock Vandergrift did. Vandergrift's a very talented guy. I just don't think he's ready yet. And Brock Vandergrift decided that he was going to stay instead of entering his name to the transfer portal. We also have redshirt freshman Gunnar Stockton, who could see some time in mop-up duty, but that's all going to depend on it. At the running back position, we have not had a truly stacked running back room since probably 2017, and even after we had some good rooms with DeAndre Swift being with Elijah Holyfield and Brian Harrion, but we got some guys. Kendall Milton, he's been injured a lot the past 2 years, so if he can get back to his freshman self, even a little bit better than that, that'd be great for a running game. Dejon Edwards, he's been great. He's gotten better every year. He's been sort of an underrated back in our backfield, and we have the young stud in Branson Robinson. They don't call him Nick Chubb Jr. for no reason. Freshman Roderick Robinson could get into the fray as well, and redshirt freshman Andrew Paul. We also have Cash Jones, who showed out a lot with some of those guys being injured during the spring game. So we'll see how the run game turns out. Wide receiver, we still have Marcus Resemy-Jacksaint, Lad McConkey, and Arian Smith. But we also went and got 2 guys out of the portal that I think are going to be good. Dominic Lovett, who was top 5 in receiving yards in the SEC last year with Missouri. And that was with Brady Cook being the quarterback and the offense not being as dynamic as a team like Georgia, LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, even Mississippi State. And we also got Robert Thomas from Mississippi State. Now, he's gotten into some legal trouble during this offseason with traffic violations, but he seems to have gotten back on the right track, and if he can work, if he decides to work, I think that he could be a very vital part to this offense. You also have sophomore Dylan Bell and junior Jackson Meeks that can get some playing time. So we'll see how they do. You also have some freshman Anthony Evans, who was highly sought after in the recruiting market. I think he flipped to us from Oklahoma. The offensive line, we're replacing 2 tackles. Rest in peace, Devin Willock. Hope his family's doing well. And right now, slotted to fight for those jobs is Ernest Green, Austin Blasky, freshman Monroe Freeling, Amarius Mims, Chad Lingberg, and Drew Bobo. So we'll see who comes out on top at the tackle positions. Guard, we should be fine with Xavier Truss and Tate Ratledge. And at center, we have Cedric Van Pran coming back, which was a good get for us. On defense, stacked as always. We have Michael Williams coming back as a sophomore. We have Naz Stackhouse at nose tackle. Warren Brinson, senior defensive tackle, who started to come on near the end of the season. You also have Tremel Wallflower, Zion Logue, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. So D-line's going to be, while we're not going to have that one guy, we're going to have a lot of guys that can work to do that. We have 2 highly touted freshmen in Jordan Hall and Jamal Jarrett that could make an impact as well. Linebacker Chaz Chambliss, who came in for Nolan Smith last year, comes back, and he's going to be on the opposite side of the D-line, where Michael Williams is on the other side. And he's going to be in there with some highly touted guys like Marvin Jones Jr., freshman Samuel Impemba, who has been compared to Lorenzo Carter. So we'll see if he can live up to that. Linebacking core, we have Jamon Dumas-Johnson, leader of the defense, Smile Munden, Jalen Walker, Xavier Sori, E.J. Lightsey, Raylan Wilson, freshman, and C.J. Allen, freshman. Very talented. The front 7, I'm not worried about. The secondary is one of the one place to where I'm a little bit skeptical. You have Dalen Everett, who's a sophomore coming in. You have Kamari Lassiter, who was a good corner 2 for us last year. You have Malachi Starks, who comes back as a sophomore, who really was a star-studded freshman. Javon Bullard, who highlighted that defense with a bunch of hits and sacks, really. Dan Jackson coming back from injury as a redshirt senior is big. We also get Tyke Smith, who finally is going to get to have a starting role. You have Jonel Aguero as a freshman, and you have a sophomore transfer, Smoke Bowie, coming in from Texas A&M. Really, we didn't have a lot of transfer coming in. We never have under Kirby Smart. We have had like a handful every year, if that. So I'd like to see how these transfers do if they even get starting time. I think Dominic Lovett definitely will, but Ra Thomas and Smoke Bowie, we'll just have to see. With that being said, let's go ahead and look at the schedule. Now, there's no secret that Georgia's schedule for 2023 is not hard at all. I mean, last year, we were supposed to play Oklahoma, but the university and the SEC backed out of it. The SEC told Georgia to back out of it because Oklahoma and Texas joined the SEC, so it is what it is. We're just going to have to deal with it. Week 1, we play University of Tennessee Martin Skyhawks. For some reason, they gave this as the night game instead of something like South Carolina in Week 3, but I'm not complaining. We finally get a night game in over 2 years, so safe to say we're going to win that game. I think it's going to be a good place for us to be able to use multiple quarterbacks, show a lot of our backups, and just get some experience. Next up, we have Ball State. Similar situation. I don't think this is going to be a Kent State situation from last year. Kirby's going to have our guys ready. So I don't think we're going to be looking for next week either, especially against a team like this. So 2-0 before we host South Carolina. South Carolina is an interesting team. They lost some of their guys, especially Marshawn Lloyd, going to USC and Jelani Bell going to Florida State. But they're a very good coach team by Shane Beamer. He's overachieved the first 2 years that he's been a head coach there with win totals. And they still have Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler, very polarizing quarterback when he is consistent. Now, he's not been consistent. He wasn't consistent last year with his play, but the last few games he played were very polarizing. So I think South Carolina could be dangerous, but I think we're going to have too much firepower and too many guys on defense to allow that to happen. So I think we get the win at home against South Carolina before hosting UAB. 4 straight home games is very favorable for the Dogs, and I think this is going to be a good test for getting our young guys, just like with Ball State and UT Martin. I think we're going to win this easily, though. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. So 4-0 before we have our first true road game. And it's not an easy one either. Auburn. Jordan-Hare Stadium is one of the most hostile stadiums in the country, or in the SEC at least. I'm planning to do a video ranking the top 10 or all the SEC stadiums. Auburn Stadium is top 3. I don't care what you say. We have gone in there before. Look at 2017. We went in there and we lost 40-17 when we were the number 1 team in the country. 2019, we went into there and we got up big, 21-7, I think it was, before we couldn't score at all, and Auburn was trying to make a comeback. Now, we did win the game, but it's not an easy place to play. Ask Alabama. So it's going to be a tough game. Hugh Freeze is a good coach, and I would not be surprised if Auburn keeps it close going into the 3rd and 4th quarter, but I think Georgia has enough talent and firepower to overpower Auburn, especially at this point under Hugh Freeze tenure. Now, a couple of years from now, or at least even next year, this game is going to be very tough for Georgia, like it was under Gus Malzahn, and it wasn't under Brian Harsin, but you get what I'm saying. So I do think Georgia wins this game, goes to 5-0 before coming back home to face Kentucky. Kentucky, they're going to be a very physical team like always. They got a quarterback in Devin Leary to replace Will Levis. Their running game is going to be interesting with the loss of Chris Rodriguez. They got a guy in from NC State. They got Cavassier Smoke. They got some young guys, but I just don't know about the Kentucky run game. Now, that could change because they have some pass catchers. They're talented but not very experienced. And Baron Bell, maybe? Forgetting his name. Baron Ball, maybe. But anyways, they got some pass catchers, and Devin Leary could sling that rock. However, the defense is very physical. They've been susceptible to Georgia's run game ever since Kirby has gotten there. Even in 2016, where our running game was not the best, we were able to run on Kentucky pretty well. So I think Georgia does what they've done the past few years at home and dominates the game and is able to get a win here to go to 6-0 before going on the road to Vanderbilt, which most likely will be taken over by Georgia fans. And I don't think that Vanderbilt, they haven't scored a point on Georgia since 2019. So I don't think they may score a point, but they're not going to score enough to challenge Georgia. I think Georgia goes into their bye week 7-0. Coming out of it, this is going to be a harder stretch than the 7 games before it. We have Florida and Jacksonville, Missouri at home, Ole Miss at home, at Tennessee, and at Georgia Tech. Florida is, they're not there yet. Give Billy Napier like 2 or 3 more years. Give him at least 1 more year to get his guys in there, because Florida was ravaged by the unsuccessful recruiting of Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen was living off of Jim McElwain's recruits for a good while there, and the recruits that he was bringing in, they were slow, they weren't big enough, they weren't talented enough to play at the Florida standard. So Give them a couple of years. I think Georgia wins this game big like they have since 2021 and go to 8-0 before hosting Missouri. This could be a tough game. Missouri, ever since the Eli Drinkwitz got there, have increasingly been closer and closer, more physically, with Georgia. Not there, but when I would say that they're maybe close to Kentucky. I wouldn't say Kentucky's level physically or physicality, but they're getting there. And we saw last year how physical they could be, especially on the D line. And it's going to be tough for Georgia to play against this after coming off that Florida game. Now, I do think Georgia wins, but I would not be surprised if Missouri kept it close. I just think Georgia offensively is going to be have a lot of firepower with Carson Beck throwing the ball to Dominic Lovett, Brock Bowers, Oscar Delp, Arian Smith, and guys like that. I mean, we do have the best tight end in the country. So I think we go to 9-0 before hosting Ole Miss. This is going to be a big game for Kirby as well. Kirby, in his first year, played Ole Miss on the road and lost in a blowout, and we haven't played Ole Miss since. This will be a good game. I know Kirby's not going to be, probably not going to, well, who knows what he's going to be telling his guys behind closed doors to get them motivated, but he's not going to come out and tell the press, we want to win this game because I lost to them in my first year. But I think it's going to be a good game with Lane Kiffin coming to town. And the one thing with Ole Miss, that quarterback situation, if they had Matt Corral, it would be maybe a different story, but I think Georgia wins in maybe a 7 to 10 point win, something like that. I just don't think Ole Miss is going to be able to keep up with Georgia. Next up, we have the game at Tennessee, the game of the year. This is going to be an interesting game, dude. Tennessee, after being humiliated last year by Georgia, they're going to be ready to get some revenge, and Georgia's going to be coming in wanting to stay alive, stay with the win streak, and keep getting wins against Tennessee. The thing is, with Joe Milton, you're going to have to play a absolutely perfect game to beat Georgia. With your defense not being on the level of Georgia, on the level that it needs to be as Tennessee, your offense can only do so much, especially if Georgia slows that down. Joe Milton has a cannon for an arm, but he can be inconsistent at times, and I think Georgia's defense can bait him into some traffic to throw picks or stay in the pocket for too long. So I think Georgia wins this to go 11-0. Then we have at Georgia Tech, which I think Georgia Tech is going to be an improved team this year. They haven't made a bowl game since 2018, and now they got Brent Key as their head coach, who played at Georgia Tech, and he got them playing well, especially when they played us, even though we beat them 37-14, I think, or 37-21. I think Georgia Tech's going to be a better coach team, but they're just like a lot of these other teams. I don't think that they got the talent needed to compete with Georgia. So that's just what I think. I think Georgia goes 12-0, and I think they go play for an SEC title for the third year in a row. I just think that Georgia is probably top two, if not number one team in the country for this year too. Carson Beck's coming in. He looked great during the spring game. I know that doesn't mean a lot, but he's had some time where he has come in and thrown the ball around. If he can limit turnovers, then Georgia could go 3 for 3 for national titles in a row. So we'll just have to see. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Go Dogs.